Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where The Hollywood Reporter just made it with one more ridiculous DCEU headline of the summer before Labor Day weekend. This broke this morning, and that's the idea that the whole reason that Warner Brothers hired Martin Scorsese to be a producer on their upcoming Joker movie, whose deal, by the way, Scorsese's deal apparently isn't done yet, and after he sees this article, I wonder if he'll still close it, but apparently they're like, we don't really want Scorsese. We want Scorsese so we can get to DiCaprio to play the Joker. It's the most ridiculous story ever. And we're going to break that down. But first I want to talk about the fact that clearly, as we've discussed before, somebody at The Hollywood Reporter knows somebody who works on the DCEU films. And I think it's pretty clear at this point that that individual, and I don't think they're even particularly high ranking, but that person has tremendous disdain for what Warner Brothers is doing. And I would suspect the source material, because the vibe of the articles is always negative and seems to be working against Warner Brothers in DC, right? If you were to consistently leak information to a journalist, right? It would be because it benefits you, right? You'd be like, oh yeah, this, these stories are really helping me, shape how people view what we're doing here at the studio. But it just causes headache after headache after headache. I mean, I guess if you want to argue that no publicity is bad publicity, then I guess it's okay, and people certainly are talking about it. But I feel like all month long, the DCEU headlines, in the film, I think the TV, like for instance, the Nightwing casting yesterday was fantastic. But I think that all the DCEU headlines have been kind of like pushing even the most hardcore DCEU supporters towards the brink. So I think that there are so many movies and television shows where they're like, we have to find the leak. That's priority number one. Stop the leak. And I think that's what they should be saying over at Warner Brothers and the DCEU. Somebody is undermining them over there significantly, and they're using The Hollywood Reporter to do it. For instance, this article, as some of you tweeted me, once again says, oh, Ben Affleck's not going to star in the Batman, but parentheses, Matt Reeves and Warner Brothers constantly deny that he's not. But he's not. Our source says he's not. So you have two people, the reporter who keeps getting these leaks and the person who's leaking them, who I think this stuff is stupid, I guess. I don't know. And they're not, I guess maybe they're just frustrated, which some of you might write and be like, this person's just trying to let us know how ridiculous it is over there. Well, then why aren't they like saying what the struggle is behind the scenes and like, oh, well, we have some people in some suits who want it to go this way, but then there are some suits who are causing a problem. And you'd be leaking who the problem was, right? You'd be like, this person is getting in the way of all good ideas. And then all the fans would be like, they're horrible. And then there would be pressure to get rid of them. And that's how you use the press. But anyway, let's talk about this idea of Leonardo DiCaprio as the Joker. Now, Leonardo DiCaprio hasn't worked since The Revenant in 2015, came out at the end of 2015, and he finally got his Oscar. And he's taken a break. You deserve a break, DiCaprio. His campaign for that Oscar was long and hard and demoralizing. But I think that not only did he take a break because he just wanted to, celebrate his win, and then, I think having gotten an Oscar, you can take a break. You'll work forever at that point, although DiCaprio will work forever no matter what. But I think that you might recall he had some significant legal problems, which I believe might even still be ongoing, about the financing for Wolf of Wall Street and how that money was actually supposed to go to help the people of the country it came from, but was used to make the Wolf of Wall Street. So maybe he and Martin Scorsese, by the way, might be sick of each other after having to deal with this headache, because that's, of course, the last time they teamed up. But here's where it gets really ridiculous, and I'm sure many of you have already written this, because it's the most obvious problem with this. DiCaprio and Leto are the same age. So why on earth? It can't be a Joker origin story anymore. It would just have to be a standalone Joker story with a different actor. I mean, you can get away with it if you say, well, I need a young Joker. And you're like, okay, well, as fantastic as Leto is held up, he's not going to pass to someone who's in their, late teens, early 20s. So they're like, okay, we're going to get somebody else. Some of you have already suggested Will Poulter for the role potentially. He's so un-Leto-y, I don't know why you would do that. But still, there's really no excuse except for trying to hedge your bets to cast a contemporary of the actor who's currently playing the role. And in this article, this was the most interesting thing to me. They said that Jared Leto is indeed not happy. No crap, Sherlock, right? That they're going to have competing Jokers. And that William Morris and Endeavor were two really big talent agencies, and they merged to create WME. And WME is trying to lure Jared Leto away from CAA with this problem, saying, we'd never let that happen to you, Jared Leto. And I was talking to my friend about this morning, and she was like, well, how would they keep that from happening? And it's like, well, clearly going forward in contracts, it's going to have to say no one else can play the same role, the same character at the same time that I am. That's going to be written into contracts, I guarantee you, from now on, if the actor has the clout to ask for that. A lot of actors, because they often cast up-and-comers, will just be stuck. So I'd also like to point out that there's that CAA connection again with Warner Brothers and especially the DCEU. Just like behind the camera with the directors and writers they've been hiring, but you can see it even extends to the talent. So I think Leonardo DiCaprio's The Joker is a really dumb idea, not to mention I don't think he's a good fit with the character. While I've been very supportive of Leto, it was weird. In a comment section yesterday, I think on the Nightwing video, someone said I wasn't supportive of Jared Leto's Joker. I've been incredibly supportive of Jared Leto's Joker. And I keep saying that the reason he didn't quite connect in the film Suicide Squad is because I didn't think that David Ayer gave him the support that he clearly needed as an actor. But I think that what he created there clearly has struck a nerve with the movie-going audience. And I find it very appealing. But I don't know if maybe I'm just giving him the benefit of the doubt and wishful thinking, because the recent Blade Runner short that was released to come out ahead of that movie, which has Jared Leto front and center, I thought was pretty awful. And I think a lot of why it was awful, besides being ridiculously impossible to follow, was that Leto's performance was very bad. So seeing that makes me sort of nervous. I'd be like, oh, like I can see maybe where Warner Brothers is coming from, and they're like, the fans obviously like him in the Suicide Squad world and with Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn, but I don't know what to do with him because he's not good. I think that Jared Leto is so experimental that he's experimental at the price of the cost of the overall project. I just think he's too into what he wants to deliver and not enough into what the whole project needs to deliver, and that's problematic. All right, so that's the first story of the day, and I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts on that. Now, for the second story, here's some great casting, just some absolutely fabulous casting, and that is Sam Rockwell has landed the role of George W. Bush in Adam McKay's upcoming Dick Cheney movie, which is his follow-up to The Big Short. Adam McKay, of course, rose to fame through Saturday Night Live and then going off with Will Ferrell to make a ton of successful movies. I think the Anchorman films are really their calling card. McKay directed those. And now he's become a really serious, but yet still comedic filmmaker. I loved The Big Short. Kind of depressing at the end there, but I thought it was very well done. And it did pretty well at the Oscars. I think it won, off the top of my head, I think McKay actually won screenplay. But not a lot of people saw it because I think it was so depressing. But anyway, he's making this one, this Dick Cheney movie, and Christian Bale is going to star as Dick Cheney, and it's going to follow him all the way from not going to fight in the Vietnam War to his rise in the corporate sector, the private corporate sector, to then becoming arguably the most powerful vice president in history. And Steve Carell will also be in the movie. I think he's playing Rumsfeld. And then Amy Adams is going to be Dick Cheney's wife. And then Bill Pullman's in the film as well. I'm not sure who he's playing. But Sam Rockwell as George W. Bush is absolutely phenomenal. And also, this is a great time to be playing George W. Bush because it's become a much more complex role. I thought Josh Brolin did a nice job in the Oliver Stone film, but at that point, he was viewed very much as a caricature. But now, history, I think, has been very kind to George W. Bush, and I think it's shown a little bit more of the compassion that people didn't see when he was in office. And also, I think that he's become such an interesting person after his presidency, becoming this painter, very good friends with Bill Clinton and also the Obamas, particularly Michelle. That hilarious thing at the inauguration where he couldn't put his rain poncho on. People have talked about, and people who had a problem with George W. Bush's presidency, now that they're seeing what's happening now, Aziz Ansari did a great bit on this when he hosted Saturday Night Live. You just see George W. Bush in a very different light. So I think it's, even though Sam Rockwell will still be playing him during that period in time when things seem more black and white with George W. Bush, I think now you can add a little more nuance, a little more layers, a little more texture, and I think that should make for something that's really interesting. I wonder if he'll be portrayed, in fact, as a sympathetic figure. And if the movie will vilify Dick Cheney, or if perhaps it will try to be a little more sophisticated than that and allow you to maybe draw a couple of different conclusions. After The Big Short, I'm not sure if the movie will have an agenda or if it'll just try to tell the truth. It's interesting. So I'm just really glad also to see Sam Rockwell back on top, or at least with the potential to be back on top. He was there for a while. He was great in Iron Man 2. I loved him. I loved that whole movie. But a lot of people didn't like Iron Man 2, and I feel that Jon Favreau, who got kicked off the franchise after that, although he also has recovered quite nicely. Now he makes, basically live-action fairy tales professionally, and he's very good at it. First with The Jungle Book, and now, of course, the upcoming Lion King. But I think Sam Rockwell took a lot of the blame as well. Also, I think that kind of killed Mickey Rourke's career. It was tough. Robert Downey Jr. is like, I'm getting out of this, and I don't care who has to go down so that I can survive. And pretty much everybody else did go down. But Rockwell has been struggling, I think, in the last couple of years. But, he kept working. He kept himself in the game. And look, it's time for him to come back. I mean, as long as you're still in it, you're not out. That's, I think, the bottom line when it comes to a business that has ups and downs. Some people work forever. Like I recently watched Tropic Thunder, and I was amazed at how consistently most of the people in that movie have worked. Like Jack Black should feel really good about the fact that he's just been working consistently like since Tropic Thunder came out. He's not always a big star. He's not always in the biggest movie of the year. But again, consistency is the key, and that's a really solid career. Very, very, very interesting. But Sam Rockwell has a good couple of movies coming up. He's in The Woman Walks Ahead, the Jessica Chastain Oscar contender. And he's also in The Best of Enemies. That's what he's shooting, I think, right now. And that's a true life period race drama. We'll see if they can make that seem unique. I think that people want to see different stuff now. I think people are tired of some of the same old narratives. But anyway, that stars Taraji P. Henson, who, of course, is hot off of Hidden Figures. So good for Sam Rockwell. I think he's a great choice for that role, and I'm very happy for him as an actor personally. All right, so the third story of the day is that Kingsman 2, I saw the trailer last night in front of Inhumans and IMAX, and I was just blown away, the latest trailer. And I was thinking to myself, who wouldn't see this movie? But Kingsman, interestingly enough, while the first one did quite well, it was a sleeper hit, it's still not a huge hit. And I'd be curious to know, do you plan to see Kingsman opening weekend? And if not, why not? Because to me, it seems like something that you could not be able to resist. It will just look so spectacular. But according to tracking, it finds itself in a close race box office-wise, which is exactly what I'm talking about, with the Lego Ninjago movie, both opening September 22nd. The first Kingsman opened at $36.2 million, but it was opening, remember, opposite 50 Shades of Grey, the first one, which had a phenomenal $85 million opening. So that took a lot of the business away. And I think Kingsman was discovered by people as time went on who had made 50 Shades their first choice for Valentine's Day weekend. And also because everybody was talking about it, it was kind of like a cultural moment. But Kingsman eventually made it to 414 globally, which is pretty amazing for a movie like that. So here comes the sequel, and it seems like they've spent quite a bit of money on it, and they're trying to appeal to the American audience. They're really going hard at it with The Statesman, and it's expected to open just a smidge higher, though, with 40 to 45, one of those only being 4 million higher than the first, the other being about 10. And then Ninjago is set at 35 to 40. So as you can see, someone could stumble, someone could have an unexpected break, they could end up right in the same ballpark in a photo finish for first place. Now, I don't think Ninjago needs to open at number 1 because everybody understands that's not as popular a brand as Lego General, like the first Lego movie, and also Lego Batman. So I think 35 to 40 in a number 2 opening would be amazing for Warner Brothers. They'd be thrilled. But if Kingsman doesn't open at number 1, I think that would be a problem for that franchise. Especially because we know that Matthew Vaughn wants to make a third one. And in fact, he's been recently tying himself to other projects potentially to try and to scare Fox into greenlighting 3 so they have him locked down. They're probably waiting to see how the movie opens, and with the tracking like this, you can understand that. Let's hope that once it hits theater and we've gone past Labor Day, that Fox really puts the pedal to the metal when it comes to advertising. Although, as I've said, I don't think you can get better advertising than they've had so far. I love the latest, I love all the trailers, but the latest one is just spectacular. And then I recently retweeted on social media, obviously, that's where you retweet things, some punches for free, a little clip they had that was just a whole bunch of punches with some great music, and that was fabulous. So if it doesn't do well, there's just something about it that doesn't appeal to audiences, which would be unfortunate. All right, but it would certainly not be the fault of anyone who made the movie. I don't think you can do a better job. I can't wait to see it. All right, so the viewer question of the day comes from John Camara. And so yesterday we talked all about Oscars, particularly The Shape of Water and the tremendous buzz it has coming out of Venice now that people have finally seen it, and also that Fox is really going to push War for the Planet of the Apes and for a special Oscar for Andy Serkis. So in that context, John came up with a really great question. So John says, "Hi, Grace. I have a question. With Oscar season starting to heat up, I am curious to know how a studio undergoes an Oscar campaign. For example, how does a studio prioritize which film, director, etc. to stage an Oscar campaign for? Like how the Weinstein Company campaigned for Lion over The Founder. Also, what does it take for a studio to launch a successful Oscar campaign? Please pick my questions. I really enjoy all your videos, and thanks for offering valuable insight into Hollywood for the world." Ah, thanks, John. What a nice thing to say. Well, let's go through this. So, for instance, with Lion over The Founder, Lion is a global story with a diverse cast, and it talks about how the internet is changing people, how people connect, in their personal lives, and it can lead to life-changing moments, like this guy finding his adopted kid, finding his family all the way back in India. And it's also it's a very modern story, and a story that hasn't been told before. Then you contrast that with The Founder. I think the Weinstein Company, by the way, made the right choice, unfortunately, because while I love The Founder, I just think that businessmen aren't particularly sympathetic these days, and I think that people just wouldn't have gotten behind The Founder. And also, for some reason, Academy voters just aren't into Michael Keaton. So I think that they made the right choice. Now, of course, Lion didn't win any Oscars, but it did get 6 nominations, and it won 2 BAFTAs. So that's kind of like, it's not a home run for the Weinstein Company, but it still shows they're in the game and they can get results. Whereas I think there was too much risk with The Founder that they couldn't get any results, and that would hurt them going forward for people taking their film to them as a distributor in the future. But we'll see how they fare this year. So far, Wind River and Tulip Fever look like uphill battles when it comes to awards season. So overall, when a studio is deciding what films to prioritize for, they only have a limited amount of money they can spend on Oscar campaigns. So they can't campaign for every film they release that year. They have to pick and choose. And also they have to decide if it's worth the money at all. Sometimes the major studios won't push any movie because it's just not the space that they work in. Like Disney's not. I mean, Disney's probably actually going to push Beauty and the Beast, and they have pushed it when it came out. But, that's like, and Disney has so much money. They're like, whatever. It's crumbs for us financially. But basically what most studios would do is they would look at the landscape and they would decide which film has the best chance. And that comes down to the talent involved, like whose turn is it? Who's been nominated a whole bunch of times or been nominated once, and a lot of times the talent is chosen going in with that in mind. So that's something that's decided early on if you're making an Oscar bait film. Then you want to see what the political angle could potentially be. This doesn't count. These things are all taken into account for Oscar bait movies. Like when you make a film like Moonlight, you've already thought of all this. And Moonlight had a very strong political angle. The representation of people of color in the LGBT community that they knew they were going to go in strong with, and which would really get a lot of attention. You also want to see what the reviews are like. If you don't have good reviews, you're dead in the water. But at the same time, if you have surprisingly good reviews like The Shape of Water, you get a push forward. Then you want to see what the buzz is for your movie, and also just what the industry conversation is. Do you see a way for you to shape that conversation and to drive it in your direction? Just what seems like something that's doable. What seems like a path of a path that it seems you can traverse successfully. Then what you have to do once you've decided the films that you're going to push, like for instance, one of you also asked me, why is Fox going to be able to have enough money to push both Planet of the Apes and Logan? War for the Planet of the Apes and Logan. And I don't know. I don't see a lot of buzz for Logan. Logan's going to be an uphill battle, and they might split the vote. They might be like, voters might be like, do you want to give Andy Serkis a special Oscar, or do you want recognition for your comic book work? And I think that Fox, based on what the comments were made recently from the head of the studio, Peter Chernin, or one of the people at the studio, they really want Andy Serkis to get this Oscar because they're not going to make, Hugh Jackman's not going to make any more Wolverine movies either, though. But maybe they're like, well, we're going to push you for the greatest showman, the greatest showman, Hugh, so that's what we're going to push for you. They're not going to push Hugh in 2 movies. So he might have undercut himself with Logan's awards chances because of doing The Greatest Showman, which comes out in limited release at Christmas time to be pushed at the Oscars. So that's problematic. That might be your answer right there, in fact. But I think that, you can only bend industry voters out of their comfort zone so much, and so you can't push to bend them in the direction of Apes and Logan. All right, so what you do once you've decided what movies you're going to push, you have to court the voters. It's very political. You have special screenings all over town, usually on the 2 coasts, New York and Los Angeles, with Q&As, where people who, a lot of the people who do the voting, particularly in the guilds, a lot of them are retired. They don't really work in the business anymore. So this is a chance for them to be razzle-dazzled with big Hollywood talent, talking to them in person, rubbing shoulders, shaking hands, all that stuff. So you really want to kind of like, with Leonardo DiCaprio, they said like for The Revenant, he went everywhere. He shook everybody's hand. He talked to everyone. So everyone is like, oh, Leonardo DiCaprio is such a swell guy. He's tried to win an Oscar for so long. Let's give it to him. So that's one thing. Then you have a lot of luncheons. Then you have events with the guilds. Sometimes they're screenings with Q&As. Sometimes they're luncheons. All kinds of stuff. Sometimes they're exhibits, etc. Then you have ads in the trades and around LA on billboards. Then you have the film festival circuit. You're taking your movie to all the festivals. You're talking to everybody. A lot of the other people at the festivals are also voters. So, everybody's kind of like, hey, how are you doing? I want to win an Oscar. You want to win an Oscar. I'll vote for you if you vote for me. All kinds of stuff like that. Then you do interviews in the trades. There are a ton of interviews from Venice that are in the trades right now with everybody starting their awards campaign. For instance, Matt Damon today was interviewed for Suburbicon, but he's also talking about downsizing a little bit. And yesterday, Alexander Payne, who wrote and directed Downsizing, did an interview. And then you want to have cover stories around the time that the award season comes out. So you want to be maybe on the cover of Vanity Fair. You want to do a big piece in the New York Times. Basically publications on websites that voters go to. You really only care about the voters. And as far as the media goes, we go with them to create this sense of inevitability. That's the ideal situation where you're like, I have to vote. A vote for anyone else would be wasted. And I think that's the ideal goal, to eventually, by the time you get to like the big awards, like right now, every film is just trying to break out as a front runner. But by the time you get to like November, December, people are like, oh, this person's going to win, or it's down to these two. And so that's very much, I think, a big part of that is these award campaigns shaping that behind the scenes. Like Jeff Bridges won for Crazy Heart because people felt it's time. So if you voted for anyone else for Best Actor, your vote was just being thrown away. And when it comes to DiCaprio, he had the same situation. That's why they're so often not a surprise at award ceremonies, because this narrative has been crafted for months already. All right, so that's the answer to your question, John. I hope it was helpful. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. Please write down what you think of today's top 3 stories, John's viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered on Tuesday, because Monday is Labor Day here in the United States, and any questions that you might have. And if you're in the United States, I hope you have a wonderful Labor Day weekend. And to everyone in Texas, I hope your recovery is going smoothly. All right, thanks so much for watching. You can check out some more videos right now.